Unless otherwise indicated, Ratchet Book Club is intended for a mature audience. Viewer discretion is greatly advised. Welcome to Ratchet Book Club, where we read hood classics and good classics. I'm Derek. 916-633-1537, Ratchet and Ratchet at gmail.com, Ratchet Book Club on Twitter, Ratchet Book Club on Facebook. Chapter 60. When we stepped out of the conference room and into the hall, Charlene Coleman knew the awful truth the moment she saw our faces. She opened her arms to Lori, and Lori fell into them and held tightly to her, weeping. I wished that I could turn back time while remembering all that had happened in the past half hour and go at him again with greater finesse. Of course, I knew another session with him would not achieve anything more than the one just ended, as neither would 10 sessions, 100. Talking to him was like talking to the whirlwind. Words wasted as surely as a cease and desist command shouted into a monsoon. I knew that I had not failed Annie, that coming here had been a hopeless gamble from the start. Nonetheless, I felt that I had failed her, and I found myself in a despair so unnerve-rating that I didn't even think I had the strength to walk back to the parking lot. The photo, Lori suddenly remembered. The rotten bastard has Annie's photo. She didn't need to elaborate. I understood why the skin around her eyes turned livid, why her mouth tightened with revulsion. I couldn't bear the thought of him alone in his cell with my Annie's photo, drinking her in with his eyes, and slaking his thirst for cruelty with the thought of her painful death. Bursting back into the conference room, I found him with the guard, who was about to unshackle him from the table. Reaching out to him, I said, "That photo belongs to us." He hesitated, held it towards me, at arm's length, but would not release it when I tried to take it from him. "What about the cards?" he asked. "What cards?" "On my birthday, and at Christmas." "Yeah, right. Real Hallmark, our deal." "We don't have any deal, you son of a bitch." His face flushed. "Don't call my mother names." He was serious. We had been here before. The anger receded from him, and he said, "But I forgot. She's your mother too, isn't she?" "No. My mother's at home in Snow Village, painting an iguana." "Does this mean no candy money either?" "And no cheese doodles." He seemed genuinely surprised at my attitude. "What about the Constance Hammersmith paperbacks?" "Give me the photo." Releasing it to me, he said to the prison guard, "We need a few more minutes of privacy, please." The guard looked at me. "Sir?" Afraid to speak, I merely nodded. The guard retreated from the room and watched from behind the window. "Did you bring a medical release for me to sign?" Punchinello inquired. From the threshold of the drab room, where she had been holding open the hallway door for me, Lori said, "I have 3 copies in my purse, drawn up by a good attorney." "Come in," he said. "Close the door." Lori joined me on the same side of the table, though I'm sure she suspected, as I did, that he was playing us for fools, setting us up for one more cruel reversal. "When will we do it?" he asked. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "The hospital in Denver is ready for us. They just need 12 hours notice." "The deal we made, it's still yours if you want it," Lori assured him, removing the medical forms and a pen from her purse. He sighed. "I do love those detective stories." "And Hershey's bars," I reminded him. "But when we were negotiated," he said, "I didn't know I'd be giving up a kidney, which is a lot to ask, considering you've already gotten both my testicles." We waited. "There's one more thing I want," he said. Here's where he would surely hit us with the punchline and laugh at our devastation. "This is a private room," he advised us. "No listening devices because the inmates usually meet here with their attorneys." "We know," Lori said. "And I doubt the moron at the window can read lips." "What do you want?" I asked, certain that it would be a thing beyond my power to grant. "I know you don't trust me like you should a brother," he said, "so I won't expect you to do this before I give her my kidney. But once she has it, you're obligated." "If it's something I can do." "Oh, I'm positive you can do it," he said cheerfully. "I mean, look what you did to the great Bezo." I couldn't read him at all. Didn't know whether this was leading to a vicious joke or to a genuine proposal. Punchinello said, "I want you to kill that scab on Satan's ass, Virgilio Vivacemente. I want you to make him suffer and let him know I'm the one who sent you. And in the end, I want him deader than any man has ever been dead." This was no joke. He meant it. "Sure," I said. Chapter 61. The white fluorescent panels in the gray ceiling, the white documents on the gray steel table, the granular snow blowing white out of a gray day, tapping the windows as the pen described his signature with the faintest whisper of ballpoint on paper. Punchinello's guard and the one who had accompanied us from the holding chamber stood witness. They signed their names under my brother's. Lori left one copy of the document with Punchinello and returned the others to her purse. The deal had been sealed, though the conditions of it were not on paper. We didn't shake hands. I would have if he had wanted to, a small unpleasantry in exchange for Annie's life. But he didn't seem to feel like a handshake was required. "When this is all well and done, and Annie's well," he said, "I'd like it if you bring her here to see me once in a while. Christmas at least." "No," Lori replied bluntly and without hesitation, though I would have said anything he wanted to hear. "I'm her uncle for one thing," he said, "and her savior." "I won't lie to you," she told him, "and neither will Jimmy. You'll never be the smallest part of her life." "Well, maybe the smallest part," Punchinello said, reaching back as best he could in change to indicate the position of his left kidney. Lori stared him down. He grinned at last. "Here's some piece of work." "Right back at you," she said. We left him there and brought the news of his change of heart to Charlene Coleman in the hallway. From the prison, we drove into Denver, where Annie had been undergoing just-in-case prep at the hospital and where we were staying at the Marriott. The bruised sky spat granular snow like bits of broken teeth. In the city, patches of fresh ice mottled the pavement. Wind whipped the coattail to pedestrians on the sidewalks. Charlene had met us at our hotel that morning. Now, after hugs and thank yous and God bless all around, she drove back to Snow Village. In our Explorer again, just the two of us, with Lori behind the wheel, on the way to the hospital, I said, "You scared the hell out of me when you told him Annie would never be a part of his life." "He knew we'd never allow that," she explained. "If we had agreed, he'd have known we were lying. Then he'd have been sure you were lying about killing Vivacemente, too. But now he thinks you'll really do it. Because, like he said, look what you did to the great Bezo. If he thinks you'll do it, he'll keep his end of the bargain." We were silent for a block or two, and then I said, "Is he crazy or evil?" "The distinction doesn't matter to me. Either way, we have to deal with him. If he was crazy first and found his way to evil, there's some explanation for him, and almost some sympathy." "None here," she said, for she was a lioness with an endangered cub and would give no consideration to the predator. "If he was evil first, and being evil made him crazy, I don't owe him anything what one brother would owe another." "You've been thinking about this for some time." "Yeah." "Give yourself a pass. Forget it. The courts already settled the issue when he was judged mentally fit to stand trial." She braked to a stop at a red traffic light. On the cross street, a black Cadillac hearse glided past. The windows were tinted for privacy. Maybe it was transporting a dead celebrity. "I'm not actually going to kill Vivacemente," I assured Lori. Good. If you ever decide to turn homicidal, don't just run around offing people at random. Talk with me. I'll give you a list. The signal light changed to green. As we passed through the intersection, 3 laughing boys on the corner gestured obscenely at us. They were wearing black gloves, from each of which the middle finger had been cut away to add emphasis to insult. One of them threw an ice-riddled snowball that cracked hard against my door. A block from the hospital, still brooding about Punchinello and worrying about Annie, I said, "He'll back out." Don't even think it, because this is the 4th of my 5 terrible days. It was already pretty terrible there for a while. Not terrible enough. There's worse coming. There's got to be, judging by the past. That's the power of negative thinking, she warned me. In spite of the defroster, ice began to crust on the windshield wipers, and the blade stuttered across the glass. This was the day before Thanksgiving. It looked like the frozen heart of January. It felt like Halloween. Chapter 62. Captain Fluffy, brave guardian bear who prevented night monsters from creeping out of the closet and nibbling on children, shared the hospital bed with Annie. This was the most difficult assignment of his career. When we arrived, we found our daughter sleeping. Always tired. She slept a lot these days. Too much. Though Annie didn't know how close her mother had come to dying 11 months earlier, she knew the story of the cameo pendant, that it had survived an all-destroying fire, that her mother had worn in the ICU. She had asked for it, and she wore it now. My beautiful little Annie had withdrawn into a gray disguise of sallow skin and brittle hair. Her eyes were mascara with mortality, her lips pale. She looked tiny, bird-like, old. Neither magazines nor TV, nor the view from the window had any interest for me. I could not stop staring at my little girl, seeing her in my mind's eye as she had been and as she might be again. I was reluctant to look away from her or to leave the room, for fear that when I returned, I would not have Annie to look at anymore. Only photographs as she had once been. Her indomitable spirit, her courage through these exhausting months of illness, pain, and decline had been an inspiration to me. But I wanted more than inspiration. I wanted her, healed, healthy, full of life once more. My tomboy, my little bullshit artist wannabe. My parents didn't raise me to ask God for blessings or benefits. For guidance, yes. For the strength to do the right thing, yes. Not for a winning lottery number. Not for love or health or happiness. Prayer is not a gimme list. And God isn't Santa Claus. As they have taught me, I believe that without asking, we're given all we need. We must have the wit and wisdom to recognize the strengths and tools at our command and find the courage to do what must be done. In this instant, however, we seem to have done all that we humanly could. If her fate had been in the hands of God now, I would have rested more easily. But her fate seemed to be at the hands of Punchinello Bizzo. And anxiety, like swarms of something winged, flew around and around in my stomach, fluttered in my bones. And so I prayed to God to give me back my tomboy, and asked him to ensure that Punchinello did the right thing, if even for the evil reason of buying Virgilio Vivacimente's murder. Even God himself might need a fancy calculator to compute the mathematics of that morality. While I sat with Annie, immobilized by anxiety, Lori was all motion, making phone calls, coordinating things between the hospital and the penitentiary officers. When Annie was awake, we talked of many things, of cabbages and kings, of next year's at Disney World and the next year after in Hawaii, of learning to ski and bake, but never of here and now, never of the dark what if. Her brow was warm to the touch, her delicate fingers cold. Her slender wrists had grown so slight that it seemed they might snap if she risked lifting a hand from the sheets. Philosophers and theologians had spent centuries debating the existence and the nature of hell. But I knew there in the hospital that hell existed, and I could describe its streets. Hell is a child lost and the fear of never being reunited. Healthcare and prison bureaucrats proved extraordinarily helpful and expeditious. During the afternoon, Punchinello Bizzo arrived in the prison van, handcuffed, fettered ankle to ankle, under the watchful eyes of 2 armed guards. I didn't see him, only heard reports. Tests were done. They said he was a match. At 6 in the morning, the transplant would be performed. Midnight of this terrible day still lay hours away. He could change his mind before then, or escape. At 8:30, my father phoned from Snow Village to fulfill Grandpa Joseph's prediction in an unexpected fashion. After lying down for a nap before dinner, Weena had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 86. Lori drew me against my will into the corridor to share this news, lest Annie hear. For a while, I sat in a chair in an empty hospital room, so Annie wouldn't see my tears and become anxious that they were shed for her. On a cell phone, I called Mom, and we talked for a while about Grandma Rowena. You feel grief for a mother and grandmother, of course, but when the life was very long and happy, and when the end came without pain or fear, it would be almost blasphemous to grieve too hard. What surprises me, my mother said, is that she would just go before dinner. If she had known what was going to happen, she wouldn't have laid down for a nap until after we had eaten. Midnight came, and Thanksgiving morning. Considering that Annie's deteriorating condition might have made her too weak for surgery in another day, the transplant procedure began none too soon at 6 o'clock. Punchinello didn't welch. I visited him hours later in his room, where he was chained to the bed and watched over by a guard. The guard stepped into the hall to give us privacy. Although I knew well the nature of this beast, my voice broke with gratitude when I said, "Thank you." He conjured that movie hero smile, winked, and said, "No thanks necessary, bro. I'm looking forward to birthday cards, candy, mystery novels, and one snake-hearted aerialist tortured with red-hot pliers and dismembered alive. I mean, if it works for you to do it that way." "Yeah, that sounds about right to me." "I don't want to cramp your creativity," he assured me. "Don't worry about me. What you want is all that matters." "Maybe you could nail him to a wall before you really start on him," Punchinello suggested. "Nails don't hold in drywall. I better find a stud finder." He nodded. "Good idea. And before you start cutting off his fingers and hands and stuff, take his nose off. He's a vain bastard. The great Bezo told me. Very proud of his nose." "All right, but if there's anything more you want, I better start taking notes." "That's everything," he sighed. "Gosh, I wish I could be there with you." "Wouldn't that be wonderful?" I said. Annie came through the surgery as smoothly as a hot air balloon sailing. Unlike its donor, the kidney was neither crazy nor evil, and it was such an ideal match for his niece that not one serious post-operative complication arose. Annie lives. Annie bloomed. These days she charmed, she shined, she dazzled, as ever she did before the cancer dragged her down. Only one of the 5 days, April 6, 2005, remained ahead of me. Life would seem strange thereafter, with no dreaded dates on the calendar, the future unclouded by grim expectations. Assuming that I survived. Part 6. I am moonlight walking, the love of every woman, the envy of every man. Chapter 63. Between baking cakes and taking additional instruction in the use of a handgun, between perfecting my recipe for chestnut chocolate terrine and negotiating murder-for-hire contracts with insane kidney donors, I wrote the previous 62 chapters of this book during the year preceding the 5th of Grandpa Joseph's 5 dates. I'm not entirely sure why I felt compelled to write. To the best of my knowledge, no pastry chef has ever had a memoir on the New York Times bestseller list. Celebrity tell-alls, hate-mongering political tracts, diet revelations about how to lose weight eating nothing but butter, and self-help books about getting filthy rich by adapting the code of the samurai to business dealing seem to be what's wanted by contemporary readers. Ego has not motivated me. If by some miracle the book were to be a success, everyone will still think that I'm biggish for my size, a lummox. I'm not a James. And if I wrote an entire library full of books, I still would not be one. I was born a Jimmy, and I will be a Jimmy when they lay me in my grave. In part, I wrote the book to tell my children how they got here. Through what stormy seas, past what dangerous shoals. I want them to know what family means and what it doesn't. I want them to know how loved they were, in case I don't live long enough to tell each of them 100,000 times. In part, I wrote it for my wife. To be sure she will know that without her, I might as well have died back there on the first of the 5 days. Each of us has his or her destiny. But sometimes two destinies twine, coming so tightly braided that if fate cuts one, she must cut both. Also, I wrote this to explain life to myself. The mystery, the humor, dark and light, that is the warp and weft it'll weave. The absurdity, the terror, the hope, the joy, the grief, the God we never see except by indirection. In this, I have failed. I am less than 4 months short of my 31st birthday, and I've endured much. I piled up all these words, yet I can explain life no better now than I could have done when Charlene Coleman spared me the fate of Punchinella. I can't explain the why of life, the patterns of its unfolding. I can't explain it, but oh, how I love it. And then, after 17 months of peace and happiness, came the morning of the 5th day, April 16th. We were prepared in all the ways that experience had taught us to prepare, but we also knew that we could not properly prepare at all. The design can be imagined, but not truly foreseen. Because we lived by baker's hours and didn't want our kids to live by a different schedule, they were homeschooled. Their class started at 2 o'clock in the morning and ended at 8, or after they had breakfast with us, played in sun or snow, and went to bed. Their usual school was a table in the dining room, with occasional field trips to the table in the kitchen. Their mother served as their teacher and served them well. Annie had celebrated her 7th birthday this past January with a kidney-shaped cake. In a few months, Lucy would be 6, while Andy confidently cruised towards 5. They loved learning and were demon students in the best sense of the adjective. As usual on my special days, I stayed home from work. If I had thought it would do any good to tether crocodiles around the house and board up all the windows, I would have done so. Instead, I helped the kids with their lessons for a while, then prepared breakfast. We were at the kitchen table, halfway through our waffles with strawberries, when the doorbell rang. Lucy went directly to the phone, put her hand on the receiver, and prepared to dial 911. Annie took the car keys from the pegboard, opened the door between the kitchen and laundry room, and opened the door between the laundry room and the garage, preparing the route for an escape by wheels. Andy hurried into the half bath off the kitchen to pee, so he would then be ready for flight. After accompanying me as far as the archway between the dining room and the living room, Lori gave me a quick kiss. The doorbell rang again. "It's mid-month, so it's probably just a newspaper boy," I said. "Right." Less in honor of the day than to conceal a shoulder holster, I was wearing a handsome tweed sports coat. In the foyer, I slipped a hand under the coat. Through the tall French window beside the door, I could see the visitor on the porch. He smiled at me and held forth the silver box tied with red ribbon. He appeared to be 10 years old, handsome, with jet black hair and green eyes. His trimly tailored pants were of a metallic silver material. The red silk shirt had sequined silver buttons. Over the shirt, he wore a sparkling silver jacket with silver and red buttons in a spiral pattern. He looked as if he were in training to be an Elvis impersonator. If 10-year-old boys were coming around to kill me, I might as well die and get it over with. I certainly wasn't going to shoot a little boy, regardless of his intentions. When I opened the door, he asked, "Jimmy Talk?" "That's me." Holding out the box, smiling like a band mascot marching at the head of a Happiness Day parade, he said, "For you." "I don't want it." The smile widened. "But it's for you." "No thanks." The smile faltered. "From me to you." "It isn't from you. Who sent you with this?" The smile collapsed. "Mister, for God's sake, take the freaking box. If I had to go back to the car with it, he'll beat the shit out of me." At the curb stood a sparkling silver Mercedes limousine with red racing stripes and tinted windows. "Who?" I asked. "Who will beat you?" Instead of going pale, the boy's olive complexion turned taupe. This is taking too long. He's going to want to know what we talked about. I'm not supposed to chat with you. Why are you doing this to me? Why do you hate me? Why are you being so mean? I accepted the box. At once, the boy broke into the band mascot smile, saluted me, and said, "Prepare to be enchanted." No need to brood about where I had heard that phrase before. He turned on his heel, literally swiveled 180 degrees as smoothly as a pivot hinge, and crossed the porch to the stairs. I noticed that he was wearing peculiar shoes, similar to ballet slippers, supple, with thin, soft soles. They were red. With uncanny grace, he descended the steps and seemed to float rather than walk to the Mercedes. He got in the back of the limo and closed the door. I couldn't get a glimpse of the driver or any other passengers. The limousine drove away, and I took the gift-wrapped bomb into the house. Chapter 64. Sparkling, intriguing, the box stood on the kitchen table. I didn't actually believe it was a bomb, but Annie and Lucy were certain that it could be nothing else. With a smirky disdain for his sister's power of threat analysis, Andy said, "It's not a bomb. It's somebody's head cut off and stuffed in a box with a clue in its teeth." No one would ever doubt that he was Weena's great-grandson by temperament, if not by blood. "That's stupid," Annie said. "A clue to what?" "To a mystery." "What mystery?" "The mystery of who sent the head, dummy." Annie sighed with theatrical exasperation and said, "If the guy who sent the head wants to figure who sent it, why doesn't he just write his name on the thing?" "On what thing?" Andy asked. "On the thing, whatever it is that's between the teeth of the stupid head," Annie clarified. Solemnly, Lucy said, "If there's a head, I'm going to barf." "There's not a head in the box, sweet cakes," Lori promised, "and there's no bomb either. They don't deliver bombs in flashy red and silver limousines." "Who doesn't?" Andy asked. "Nobody doesn't," Annie said. Lori got a pair of scissors from a kitchen drawer and snipped the red ribbon. Studying the box, I figured it was just about the perfect size to hold a head, or a basketball. If I had to bet on one or the other, I'd put my money on the head. As I was about to lift the lid from the box, Annie and Lucy put their hands over their ears. They were more concerned about the noise of an explosion than about the shrapnel. Under the lid was a layer of folded white gift wrapping tissue. Having climbed onto a chair, kneeling there to get a better view, Andy warned me as I reached for the tissue paper, "Could be snakes." Instead of snakes, packed into the box were banded packets of $20 bills. "Wow, we're rich," Andy declared. "This isn't our money," Lori said. "Then whose is it?" Annie wondered. I don't know," Lori said, "but it's bad money for sure, and we can't keep it. I can smell the evil on it." Sniffing at the treasure, Andy said, "I don't smell nothing." "All I smell is Andy's beans from yesterday's dinner," Annie announced. "Maybe it could be my money," Lucy suggested. "Not as long as I'm your mother." Together, the five of us took the money out the box and piled it on the table so we could smell it better. There were 25 packets of $20 bills. Each packet contained 100 bills. 50,000 bucks. The box also contained an envelope. From the envelope, Lori extracted a plain white card with handwriting on one side. She read the card and said, When she passed the card to me, the 6 eyes of the 3 children followed it with intense interest. Never before had I seen handwriting as meticulously scripted as this. The letters were bold, elegantly formed, flowing as precisely as if a machine had penned them. "Please accept this as a token of my esteem and as proof of my sincerity. I request the honor of a most cordial meeting with you at 7 o'clock this evening at the Holloway Farm. The precise location will be obvious upon your arrival." The note was signed Vivacemente. "This," I told the kids, "is evil money. I'm going to put it back in the box, and then we're all going to wash our hands with a lot of soap and water so hot that it hurts a little." Chapter 65. My name is Lori Tock. I'm not the goddess Jimmy said I am. For one thing, I've got a pinched nose. For another thing, my teeth are so straight and symmetrical that they don't look real. And no matter how meticulous the surgeon has been, once you've been shot in the gut, well, when you wear a bikini, you turn heads, but not always for the same reason the Miss America does. Jimmy would have you believe I'm as tough as one of those acid for blood bugs in the Alien movies. That's an exaggeration, although it's a major mistake to piss me off. On the night that I was born, no one made predictions about my future, and thank God for that. My father was chasing a tornado in Kansas, and my mother had recently decided the snakes would be better company than he was. I have to take over this story for reasons that will become clear, and that you might have already deduced. If you let me take your hand, metaphorically speaking, we'll get through this together. So, near twilight, under a fiery sky, we took the kids next door to stay with Jimmy's parents. Rudy and Maddie were in the living room when we arrived, taking practice swings with the Louisville Sluggers they had bought in 1998. Immediately after us, 6 of the most trusted neighbors on the block came to visit, ostensibly for an evening of cards, though all of them had brought baseball bats. We play an aggressive game of bridge, Maddie said. Jimmy and I hugged the kids, kissed them goodbye, kissed them again, but tried not to make such a big deal of it that we might scare them. After returning to our house, we dressed to seem suitable for a most cordial meeting. In preparation for the 5th of the 5 days, we had added to our wardrobes. We had shoulder holsters, pistols, 2 little canisters of pepper spray for each of us. Jimmy made a pitch for me to wait with the kids while he went alone to meet with the aerialists, but I presented a convincing case for accompanying him. You remember what happened to Punchinello's testicles? If you try and keep me from going with you, you'll discover that Punch got off easy. We were mutually agreed that going to Huey Foster and bringing in the cops would be a bad idea. For one thing, Vivacamente had done nothing wrong thus far. We would have a difficult time convincing a jury that a gift of $50,000 in cash constituted a threatening gesture. Besides, we worried that whatever Vivacamente's intentions, he would clam up in front of cops, and later would go after whatever he wanted more discreetly. Even alerted by his first approach, we most likely would be blindsided. Better that everything remained out in the open between us. The weather was surprisingly mild for an April evening in high country Colorado. That doesn't tell you much, because sometimes in April, below freezing is considered mild. To Jimmy, facts are like recipe ingredients, so he'll research the temperature on the Snow County Gazette before he wrote about it. Me? I guess it was about 50 degrees. When we arrived at Holloway Farm, we debated where Vivacamente expected to meet with us. We decided that the giant red and white circus tent might be the place. In this large flat meadow, adjacent to the highway, the circus had been set up for business that week in August 1974, when Jimmy had been born. Since then, they had played no return engagement, most likely because they figured the ticket sales would be adversely impacted by the fact that during their previous visit, one of their clowns had killed 2 much-loved locals. Neither Jimmy nor I had heard anything about the circus coming to town here in April. For sure, the kids hadn't heard about it, or they would have been in full Did-ya mode. Did you get tickets? Did you? Did you? Andy would have begun having clown in the closet dreams again. Me too, probably. On second look, we realized the entire circus wasn't there. An operation of their size involved scores of trucks, motorhomes, massive portable generators, and other vehicles. Lined up along the lane to the distant Holloway farmhouse were just 4 Peterbilts, a VIP bus, and a limousine in which the costume boy had delivered the 50,000 smackers. Emblazoned on the flank of each huge silver truck, festive red lettering announced, Vivacamente. In small but still bold lettering, big top, big show, big fun. Big deal, I said. Jimmy frowned. Big trouble. Chapter 66. Only the single enormous tent awaited Jimmy and me. No smaller tents with the customary array of lesser attractions, no animal cages, no roach wagons offering hot dogs, snow cones, popcorn. Standing alone, the big top made a greater impression than if it had been at the center of the usual bustling medieval fair. 4 poles marked the high ridge line of the tent. Atop each, in the glow of a spotlight, flew a red flag with a silver circle at its center. In each circle was an italicized red V, followed by an exclamation point. Regularly spaced strings of festive, low-voltage lights dropped from the ridgeline to the sidewall, red bulbs alternating with white. Twinkling white lights surrounded the main entrance. One of the 4 Peterbolts housed the power source. The only sound in the night was a rhythmic chug and growl of gasoline-fed generators. Above the twinkling lights in the main entrance, a banner warned, "Prepare to be enchanted." Heeding that warning, we drew our pistols, checked to be sure the magazines were fully loaded, though we had checked them before leaving home, and eased them in and out of our shoulder holsters a few times to assure ourselves nothing would inhibit a quick draw. No one had come forward to greet us when we parked and got out of the car. In spite of the tents and the lights, the meadow seemed to be deserted. "We're probably misjudging Virgilio," Jimmy said. "If Conrad Beazle thought he was a monster, then he's probably a saint," I reasoned. Because when was anything Conrad said ever less than full-on nuts? "Exactly," Jimmy agreed. "And if Punch thinks he's a festering canker on Satan's ass, swine of swines, animated sewage, worm from the bowels of a syphilitic weasel, spawn of a witch's toilet, then he's probably a sweetheart," I concluded. Yeah. Ready? No. Let's go. Oh, okay. We had tied shut the silver box. Jimmy carried it by the new red ribbon, and together we crossed the meadow to the tent. We went inside. Under the big top, the meadow grass had been mown short, but no sawdust had been spread. The bleachers to accommodate the paying public had not been assembled. This was meant to be a show for an audience of 2. At each end of the tent, they had erected the sturdy frames that supported platforms and trapezes for the aerialists. Rope ladders and loop lines provided access to the heights. Aimed towards upper realms, banks of footlights revealed flyers in the air. The men looked like capeless superheroes in silver and red tights. The women wore one-piece, legless, silver and red gymnast uniforms, their bare limbs fetching. They hung by their hands from trapeze bars, hung by their knees. They arced, they somersaulted, they twirled, they flew, they snared one another out of thin air. No circus band played. No music was necessary. The performers themselves were music, elegant harmony, exquisite rhythm, symphonic in the complexity of their routines. Jimmy put down the box of money. For a few moments, we stood entranced, still aware of the weight of our wardrobes, pistols heavy in our holsters, but all thought of danger regulated to the backs of our minds. They concluded with a particularly amazing series of mid-air exchanges, during which aerialists flew from trapeze to trapeze with stunningly precise timing. 3 in flight at any time, only 2 trapezes available. Collision and catastrophe always a possibility. Out of the bedazzlement of wingless birds, one of the men soared high off a bar, twirled in midair, folded into a somersault position, and tumbled down. At the last moment, he spread his arms like wings, came out of the ball position, and landed on his back in the safety net. He bounced high, bounced again, rolled to the edge of the net, and dropped to the ground, on point like a ballet star, his arms raised above his head, as though he had just completed an entrechat. From a distance of 30 feet, he appeared to be handsome, with bold features, a proud Roman nose. His barrel chest, broad shoulders, slim hips, and trim figure made him an imposing man, lionesque. Although his hair was coal black, and though he appeared to be no older than 45, I knew this must be Virgilio Vivacemente. For from him radiated the pride of a king, a master, a paterfamilias. Because even in 1974, he had been the patriarch and the brightest star of a famous circus family, father of several children, including his 20-year-old daughter, Natalie. He must have been 70 or older this night in April. He not only appeared much younger, but had just proven himself to be athletic and extraordinarily limber. The circus life seemed to be his fountain of youth. One by one, the other performers dropped from high flight into the net. They bounced, descended to the ground, and lined up in a crescent behind Virgilio. When they were all earthbound, they raised their right arms high overhead. Then, theatrically lowering their arms to point at me and Jimmy, they said in unison, "The flying vivacimentos fly for you!" Jimmy and I started to applaud, but caught ourselves, and also stopped grinning like children. Members of the troupe were male and female, all good-looking, including a girl who appeared to be 8 or 9 and a boy of 10. They bounded out the tent like gazelles, gamboling together as though the demonstration high in the big top had required no serious effort, had been but mere play. Through the performer's entrance where the group made their exit came a tall, muscle-bound man with a scarlet robe over his arm. He went to Vivacimente and held this garment, while the star slipped his arms into the sleeves. The carrier of the robe had a brutal, scarred face. Even at a distance, his eyes seemed as menacing as those of a viper. Although he departed, leaving us alone with his boss, I was glad we were carrying pistols. I wished we had thought to bring attack dogs. The heavy yet beautifully draped robe was of a luxurious fabric, perhaps cashmere, with padded shoulders and wide lapels. In it, the aerialist had the air of a 1930s movie star, when Hollywood still had glamour instead of glitz. Smiling, he approached us, and the closer he drew, the clearer it became that he had taken measures to stave off the effects of time. The glossy black shade of his hair was too inky to be real. It had come from a bottle. Perhaps he had earned his physique with rigorous and relentless exercise, and with steroids for lunch every day. But age had been trimmed from his face by battalions of scalpels. We have all seen unfortunate women who began having extensive facelifts much too young, and who submitted to subsequent surgeries too frequently, until by their 60s, sometimes even sooner, their face had been stretched tight to the point of snapping. Their Botox brows look like plastic. They cannot completely close their eyes even asleep. Their nostrils have a permanent flare, as though they are perpetually testing the air for an offensive odor. And their enhanced lips are pulled and puckered into a permanent, pouty half-smile that inevitably reminds us of Jack Nicholson playing the Joker in Batman. But for the fact that he was a man, Virgilio Vivacimente looked like one of those unfortunate women. He came so close that Jimmy and I involuntarily backed up a step or two, which elicited a sharky smile from our host. Apparently, part of his manipulative style was to invade the space of others. When he spoke, he had a baritone voice closer in register to a bass than of a tenor. "Of course, you know who I am." "We've got a pretty good idea," Jimmy said. Because the 10-year-old boy who had delivered the box of money had been terrified of having the crap beat out of him by this man, and because of the offensive implications of the money itself, we refused to extend him courtesy that he had not earned. He'd chosen to play a game called Who's the Big Dog, and we could bark as loud as he could. "In every corner of the world," said the patriarch, "everyone knows who I am." "At first, we thought you were Benito Mussolini," I said. "But then we realized he had never been an aerialist." "Besides," Jimmy said, "Mussolini's been dead since the end of World War II. I said, "And you don't look like you've been dead nearly that long." Virgilio Vivacimente smiled more broadly, and his smile even less resembled a smile than it did a knife wound. Although the tightness of his face made the nuanced meaning of his various smiles impossible to read, I recognized the glaze that came over his eyes as he listened to Jimmy and me. He was a man who possessed no sense of humor whatsoever. Zero. Zilch. Zip. He didn't realize that we were joking between ourselves, and because he didn't grasp our tone and intent, he also didn't realize that we were insulting him. To his ear, we were talking gibberish, and he was wondering if we might be mentally retarded. Many years ago, the Flying Vivacimente became stars of such worldwide renown, he said with sonorous self-importance, that I was able to buy the circus of which I had once been an employee. And now today, there are 3 Vivacimente circuses playing at all times in every significant venue in the world. Pretending suspicion, Jimmy said, "Real circuses. You even have elephants?" "Of course we have elephants," Vivacamente declared. "One, two, many elephants." "Do you have lions?" I asked. "Prides of lions." "Tigers?" Jimmy asked. "Snarling hordes of tigers." "Kangaroos?" "No." What kangaroos? No circus has kangaroos." "No circus is a circus without kangaroos," Jimmy insisted. "Absurdity. You know nothing of circuses." I said, "Do you have clowns?" Vivacamente's stiff face froze entirely. When he spoke, his baritone voice issued between teeth set edge to edge like the jaws of a nutcracker. "Every circus must have clowns to draw the weak-minded and silly little children." "Ah," said Jimmy, "so you don't have as many clowns as other circuses do." "We have all the clowns we need and more. We're infested with clowns, but no one comes primarily for clowns." "Lori and me, all our lives, we're crazy about clowns," Jimmy said. "Or is it, I propose, that all our lives clowns have been crazy about us?" "Crazy is in there somewhere," Jimmy said. The aerialist blustered on. "Our biggest draw is always the immortal Flying Vivacementes, the greatest circus family in all of history. In all three of my shows, every member of every aerialist troupe is a Vivacamente, related by blood and by talent that makes lesser performers weep with jealousy. I am the father of some, the spiritual father of all." "To me," Jimmy said, "for a man who has achieved so much, you might think his pride to be overwhelming, but how wrong you'd be." "Humble," I agreed. "Remarkably humble." "Humility is for losers," Vivacamente thundered. Kendrick said it too. I mean, why I gotta fake humbleness because you're insecure? Like, yo, I'm better than you. I'm sexy and I know it. Huh? Eh? "I've heard that somewhere," Jimmy said. "Gandhi?" I suggested. Jimmy shook his head. "No, I think it was Jesus." Eyes glazing again with the conviction that we were idiots, Vivacamente said, "And of all the flying Vivacementes, I am supreme. On the trapeze, I am poetry in motion." Jimmy said, "Poetry in motion, Johnny Tillotson, top 10 back in the early 60s. Good beat. You could dance to it. Let's see."
When I see my baby, what do I see? Poetry, poetry in motion. Poetry in motion, walking by my side.
I could see a lot of offbeat dances being done to that song. So he's right. It doesn't have a good beat and not even close. Like, that was awful. That was bad. No offense to him. I mean, it was the 50s and a lot of music was bad unless they stole it from black folks and made it into their own. I'm just saying, but y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. But that, I can see a lot of white folks dancing off beat to it, you know, doing the, I don't know what dances white folks did back then. I don't. The mashed potato, no, that was black. The twist, nope. Mm-mm. Do you love me? I figured that was the 60s, though. Like, was that the 50s? Now that I can dance. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The beat, the song, it's right there. You can hear it and make the decision for yourself. It's available on Spotify. I will not be going back to it ever again. Ignoring him, Vivacamente boasted, "Transciting the high wire, I am moonlight walking, the love of every woman, the envy of every man." He drew a breath, expanded his big chest, and continued, "And I am rich enough and determined enough always to get what I want. In this case, I'm certain that what I want is what you will want, because it'll bring wealth and great honor to you as you otherwise would never have known." $50,000 is a lot of money, Jimmy said, but it isn't wealth. Vivacamente winked to the extent that his trimmed eyebrows were capable of completing a wink. $50,000 is just earnest money, proof that I'm sincere. I have calculated the full sum to be $325,000. And what do you expect in return for that? Jimmy asked. Your son, Vivasamente said. Chapter 67. Jimmy and I could have left the big top and driven home without another word to the maniac aerialist. Having walked out, however, we would not have understood his reasoning, and we would not have had peace, wondering what his next move might have been. His name is Andy, said Vivasamente, as though we needed to be reminded of our only son's name. But I'll create a better name, of course. Something classic, less plebeian. If I am to shape the boy into the greatest star of his generation, I must begin instructing him before his 5th birthday. As darkly funny as all this might be, it had also become too scary to play his game any longer. I said, Andy, which will always be his name, has no talent as an aerialist. He must. He has Vivasamente blood. He's my Natalie's grandson. If you know about that, then you also know he's Conrad Bezo's grandson too, Jimmy reminded him. Surely you'll be the first to admit that he's too much clown for the high wire. He's not tainted, the patriarch said. I've had him watched. I've studied the films of him. He's a natural. Films of him. Though the night was mild, my heart had gone cold. People do not sell their children, I said. Oh, Vivasamente assured me, people do. I myself had bought the children of certain Vivasamente cousins in Europe, whose family lines were strong enough to produce fine aerialists. I bought some of them from the cradle, some at the age of 2 and 3, but always before the 5th birthday. With revulsion that no doubt eluded our host as much as did our humor, Jimmy pointed to the box on the ground. We brought your money back. That's the end of it. $375,000, Vivasamente offered. No. $400,000. No. $415,000. Stop it, Jimmy demanded. $422,500, and that's my final offer. I must have this special boy. He's my last chance, my best chance to create another like me. The blood of aerialists is concentrated in him as never before. As Vivasamente's tucked and tightened face tried to express the operatic emotions that raged in him, I half expected it to crack at every corner and peel up from the bone. He pressed his hands together as if in prayer, and he began to beseech Jimmy instead of bullying him. If I had known in 1974, or any time during the years immediately after, that Natalie had given birth to twins, that you had been given to the baker and his wife, the word baker issuing from him with the acidic disdain of a blue blood snob, I would have come for you. I swear. I would have brought you back or rescued you one way or another. I always get what I want. But I thought I only had one son, and that the vicious Bezo had fled with him. Icily, Jimmy rejected that bizarre protestation of fatherly love. You aren't my father, even in the sense you might call yourself the spiritual father of everyone in your troop. Punchinello and I aren't in your troop, and we're not your sons in any sense. We're technically your grandsons, God help us, but I don't accept even that relationship. I deny you the right to be my grandfather. I refuse you. I renounce you. I repudiate you. The beseeching hands that had been pressed together abruptly separated. They formed in a white-knuckled fist. Although Vivasamente had no sense of humor, he had a rare capacity for hatred, which sharpened his eyes in the knife points, and which expressed itself unmistakably in the tightly screwed features of his carved face. The old man's voice was hypodermic, his words poisonous. Conrad Bezo never had a child with any woman he ever laid with. He was the husk of a man, sterile. With a jolt, I remembered, and I'm certain Jimmy did too, Conrad Bezo in our kitchen, the Porter Carson identity cast aside just before he shot me. He wanted Andy as recompense for our sending Punchinello to prison, as something for something. He hadn't known that Jimmy was Punchinello's twin, hadn't realized that Andy might be his bloodline. He just wanted quid pro quo, his make-weight. When I'd asked Conrad why he didn't lay down with some desperate hag who might have him and make a baby of his own, he flinched from my words and could not meet my eyes. Now I knew why. This venomous filth before us, this walking worm in a scarlet robe, drew himself to his full height, and with demented pride said, I wanted to concentrate the aerialist genes as they had never before been concentrated, and my dream was conceived in the biblical sense. But she fled me for Bezo, and denied me what was mine. Natalie was my daughter, but I am your grandfather and your father. Whoa. Having adjusted to the creepy discovery that he was Conrad Bezo's son and Punchinello's brother, poor Jimmy, sweet Jimmy, now had to get his mind around the even creepier idea that he was still Punchinello's brother, but was in fact Vivacemente's son and grandson, the product of incest. Move over, Johnny Tillotson. The hits just keep on coming. Chapter 68. Movement at the perimeter of the tent drew our attention. From outside, the muscle-bound brute with the cobra eyes stepped into the main entrance and stood there with his legs wide apart, looking as if he could deflect a runaway elephant. He was armed with a shotgun. Another man, spookily like the first, except that he had keloid scars across his face and neck, as if he had been cobbled together by Victor Frankenstein, appeared in the performer's entrance. He, too, held a shotgun. 3 others had slipped under the sidewall canvas, where it hung loosest between stakes. They were spotted around the big top, beyond the footlights, in shadows but visible. I suspected they had weapons too, but I couldn't see them well enough to be sure. And so you see, Vivacemente continued, your son Andy is my Natalie's grandson. He is also my grandson and great-grandson. My dream has been delayed 1 generation, but now it will come to pass. If you don't sell me young Andy for $422,500, I will kill the 2 of you. I will kill Rudy and Maddie, and I will take all 3 of your children at no cost to me whatsoever. Clearly, Jimmy didn't want to risk taking his eyes off Virgilio Vivacemente any more than he would have turned his back on a coiled rattlesnake. But he nevertheless looked at me. Most of the time, I could tell what my Jimmy was thinking. The terrain inside his wonderful head was my backyard. I felt at home there. This time, his lovely eyes were not windows to his thoughts as previously they had always been. His expression remained flat, enigmatic. A lesser man might have been so hammered by these revelations that he would have been paralyzed with shock, revulsion, and despair. He might have been shocked and revolted, but Jimmy never despaired. He said, "Does this blow or does it blow?" "It blows," I said. Sensing triumph, his face crafted for the smug expression that overcame it, Vivacemente put his hands in the pockets of his scarlet robe, rocked back and forth in his red slippers, back and forth. "If you think I can't kill all of you and get clean away with it, you're wrong. When the 2 of you and Rudy and Maddie are dead at my feet, I will dismember the 4 of you. Marinate your remains in gasoline. Burn them. Urinate on the ashes. Put the wet ashes in a bucket, take them to a lovely farm I own, and stir them into the muddy wallow in the corner of a pig pen. I've done it before. There is no vengeance equal to the vengeance of Virgilio Vivacemente." His gaze still locked on me, Jimmy quietly said, "With the right psychotic hag, you could father another murderous little maggot as insane as your firstborn." Vivacemente cocked his head. What did you say?" I recognized Jimmy's words. He had quoted what I had said to Conrad Bezo in our kitchen on that December night in 2002, just before the clown had shot me. I had been trying to rattle Bezo with attitude and insults, and to some extent I had succeeded. He had flinched in my verbal assault, and it looked away from me to Jimmy, giving me the opportunity to draw the pepper spray and squirt him in the face. Jimmy was proposing a similar tactic with Vivacamente. He saw that I understood. Pushing us harder, the maniac said, "When you're nothing but urine-soaked ashes in a pig wallow, I'll take your 3 children to an estate I maintain in Argentina. There, I will train Andy and perhaps Lucy to be the finest aerialists of their generation, and perhaps Annie as well. If she's too old at 7, well, she'll have other uses. Lose your lives and all your children, or sell Andy to me. Only a clown could not make the right choice between those 2 options." "It's a lot of money," Jimmy told me. "The better part of $500,000 cash, no taxes." "And we still have Annie and Lucy," I said. "We can always have another son," Jimmy proposed. "With a new baby, we forget Andy in no time." "I'd forget him in 3 months," Jimmy said. "It might take me 6. We're young. Even if it takes us 8 months to forget him, we've got a lot of good life ahead of us." Vivacamente was smiling, or appeared to be, as best anyone other than his surgeons could tell. Incredibly, he seemed to be buying what we were selling. His credulousness did not entirely surprise me. After all, Jimmy and I had enormous experience talking to maniacs in their language. "But hey," Jimmy said to me, "wow, that gives me an even better idea." I crafted a mask of bright-eyed curiosity. "What's that?" Turning to Vivacamente again, Jimmy said, "Would you buy 2? "2 what?" "2 boys. If we had another, you could buy him early, right out the cradle." I said, "Jimmy, shut up, honey," he warned me. "You never had a head for finances. Leave this to me." Jimmy had never before told me to shut up. I knew he meant to convey that he would distract our target to give me the opportunity I needed. "I'm a bull in the baby-making department," Jimmy told the crazy aerialist. "And the little lady here, she can really pump 'em out. She could take a fertility drug, too, and then maybe we could have 'em in batches." Jimmy and I were both going to die. We understood that we were cold meat standing. With all the firepower in the tent, we couldn't escape. But in dying, we could take Vivacamente with us. When this beast lay bullet-riddled and dead, our kids would be safe with Rudy and Maddie. Expanding upon his proposal with enthusiasm, Jimmy held the old man wrapped, and when the moment seemed ideal, I went for my pistol. I don't believe Vivacamente saw me from the corner of his eye. I think instead that, like a champion poker player, he caught some subtle tell from Jimmy. Without taking his hands out of his cashmere robe, he opened fire on Jimmy with a handgun concealed in the deep right pocket. He squeezed all 2 rounds as I was drawing, both of which hit Jimmy in the abdomen. Fired 2 more as I brought my pistol to bear on him, and those 2 slammed Jimmy in the chest. By the roar of them, they were high-power rounds. The first 2 knocked Jimmy backwards, and the second 2 knocked him down. Intending his 5th bullet for me, Vivacamente turned my way, but not fast enough. I shot him in the head once, and he dropped, screaming like a Valkyrie, possessed of a fury that only the righteous sane can know, that can never be matched by madmen in their moral confusion. I shot him 3 more times. This thing who raped his own daughter, this monster who bought children, this demon who would make me a widow. Beyond the damage to his face, I glimpsed in an expression of surprise. He hadn't thought that he could die. I should have saved my ammunition, because the thuggish-looking rouseabouts came towards me at a run. I couldn't take out all of them, however, and in fact, I wasn't hot to shoot any of them, not as long as I could be sure that Vivacamente was down for good, forever. When I swiveled towards the first of the approaching men, he threw down his shotgun. The second had already discarded his. The other 3 came out of the shadows, past the footlights. One had an axe and dropped it. One had a sledgehammer and pitched it aside. If the third had been armed, he had chucked his weapon far back near the side wall of the tent. Gasping equally with amazement and astonishment, with terror and horror, I watched these 5 brawny men gather around the corpse of Virgilio Vivacamente. They regarded it with shock, with awe, and suddenly broke into laughter. My sweet Jimmy, my muffin man, lay flat on his back, silent on the ground, and the rouseabouts laughed, and one of them cupped his hands around his mouth and called out in circus lingo that made no sense to me. As I collapsed to my knees at my Jimmy's side, the troop of aerialists burst into the tent, still dressed in their costumes, shrieking like birds. Chapter 69. Nice. For a few days, my chest and stomach hurt so bad that I could almost believe the 4 bullets not flattened against the Kevlar vest under my shirt, but it penetrated and done major damage. The hideous bruises didn't fully fade for weeks. As Lori told you, after leaving the kids at my parents' house, we had dressed to seem suitable for a most cordial meeting with a possible lunatic. We had gotten the 2 vests a year earlier through Huey Foster. Okay, we yanked your chain again, like we did back in chapter 24. How much fun would it have been there on the big top if you had been absolutely certain that I had survived? The Kevlar stopped all 4 rounds, but the impact, even spread across the surface of the vest, knocked the breath and consciousness out of me. I experienced a brief and not unpleasant dream about chocolate amaretto cheesecake. That sounds fucking fantastic. A chocolate amaretto. Look, so I knew somebody. I wish I still knew them because it was a while back and I can't remember who they were, but they made peach cheesecakes. Nigga, look, peach cobbler cheesecakes. I know I'm losing weight and I know I'm on a diet, but you know what I would do to a peach cobbler cheesecake? Yeah, what you're thinking probably isn't even enough. I would probably do sexual things with it to my wife. Like, I would rub it on her, and she's calling right now. No joke. I don't know how she did that. She called right as I was about to tell y'all, and she told me to just shut the fuck up. Y'all gonna have to figure out what you would do with, I know what I would do with a peach cobbler cheesecake and a banana pudding cheesecake as well. Like, either or. Just, and a lemon. Oh my God. You know, it's just, I haven't had sugar in so long. I just miss it sometimes. Anyhow, chocolate amaretto cheesecake sounds fucking fantastic. So would a strawberry amaretto cheesecake. Amaretto's just really good. Like, I used to drink it, like, by itself, like nothing else, just amaretto. I used to eat amaretto fudge. I don't know why they stopped making that. It was greatness. When I first came to, some people were laughing robustly. Others were shrieking with what I first thought was shock and fear, but what quickly changed to giddy delight. The adults and the teenagers and the children alike came to the body of Virgilio. None seemed to be either angry about his death or grossed out by his condition. Instead, each regarded the cadaver with stunned disbelief that gradually brightened into an awareness of their freedom. Vivacamente had not believed that he could die, and neither had any of his troop that snapped to the crack of his whip. The collapse of the Soviet Union surely had not surprised him a fraction as much as this did. With belief, the aerialists found themselves virtually exploding with energy, with joy. They scampered up rope ladders and loop lines into the highest reaches of the tent, to their trapezes and platforms. As sirens rose in the distance, as Lori helped me to my feet, the flyers flew in exultation and rhapsodies. Chapter 70. Earlier, in a windy moment, I wrote that revenge and justice are twin braids in a line as thin as the high wire that an aerialist must walk. And if you can't keep your balance, then you're doomed and damned, regardless of whether you fall to the left or the right of the line. A restrained response to evil is not moral, but neither is excessive violence. The only anguishing moral dilemma that Lori carried out of that big top was related to whether she should have shot to wound and disabled Virgilio Vivacamente, or whether blowing him to bits with 4 well-placed hollow point rounds might have been justified. She agonized over this for about 24 hours. But during a parade of desserts after dinner at my parents' house on the evening of Sunday, April 17th, as Vivacamente still lay in a morgue drawer, she achieved a satisfying catharsis. She decided that if she had shot the crazy son of a bitch 5 times, including 4 times after he was already dead instead of just 3, that would have been an excessive and unjustifiable response. As it was, she had no doubt, nor did I, that she was on the side of the angels. In any moral dilemma, as one strives to analyze one's motives and actions, a speedier and usually satisfying resolution can be reached if one consumes abundant quantities of sugar. As for me, I came out of the experience with no knotty moral issues. The truth of my conception didn't change who I become, who I was. I declined to dwell upon it. More important, the 5th of my 5 days had come and gone. I had survived. Every member of my family remained healthy and alive, except for Grandma Rowena, and she had died in her sleep. We had suffered a great deal en route to the safe harbor, but who does not suffer in life? When the pain passes, there's always cake. Life insurance companies price their policies on the basis of many factors, including actuarial tables. They have arcane formulae to predict your life expectancy, and if they didn't, they would soon be out of business. I do not define life expectancy by the length of life, however, but by the quality of it, by what I expect from it and how well my expectations are met. What I have learned from my true father, Rudy, and from my true mother, Maddie, and from my glorious wife, and from my beloved children, is that the more you expect from life, the more your expectations will be fulfilled. By laughing, you do not use up your laughter, but you increase your store of it. The more you love, the more you will be loved. And the more you give, the more you'll receive. Life proves that truth to me every hour, every day. And life continues to surprise. 14 months after the incident in the Big Top, Lori became pregnant. She had been told that she could never conceive again, and her doctors had been so certain of her barrenness that we took no precautions. Considering the grievous wounds that Lori had survived and the fact that she had 1 kidney, Dr. Mello Melodian counseled us to terminate. In bed the night of receiving this news, Lori said, "We'll never have the 5. 4 is the most there's any hope of. This will be the last chance. Maybe it's risky. Maybe it's not." I don't want to lose you," I whispered in the dark. "You can't," she said. "I'll haunt you in this life and kick your ass for dawdling when you finally join me in the next." After a silence, I said, "I'm paralyzed by this." Question. What? Once we were together and knew it was for always, after each of us had the strength of the other to rely on, when were we ever gutless? I thought about it for a while. Finally, I said, "When?" "Never. So why start now?" Months later, when little Rowena arrived, she popped out as easy as bread from a toaster. She was 18 inches long. She weighed 8 pounds even. She did not have syndactyly. While we were still in the delivery room, as Charlene Coleman, on the eve of her retirement, handed our swaddled infant to Lori for the first time, a young red-headed nurse stepped into the doorway and asked to speak to Mela. He conferred with her in the hallway for a few minutes, and when he returned, he brought her with him. "This is Brittany Walters," he told us. "She works ICU, and she has a story you need to hear." According to Brittany Walters, an elderly woman named Edna Carter had been admitted to ICU 48 hours earlier, after a massive stroke paralyzed her and left her unable to speak. Suddenly, this evening, Edna had sat up in bed, minutes before Lori delivered, as it turned out, no longer paralyzed. She had spoken clearly, too, and with urgency. By the time Nurse Walters reached that point in her story, I dared not look at Lori. I didn't know what I would see in her eyes, but I was afraid of the terror she would see in mine. The nurse continued. She insisted that a baby named Rowena would be born on this hospital in minutes. That Rowena would be 18 inches long and weigh 8 pounds on the nose. "Oh my," said Charlene Coleman. Nurse Walters held out a sheet of notepaper, and Edna insisted that I write down these 5 days. When I had done it, she fell back in her bed and died. My hand shook as I took the paper from her. When I glanced at Mellow Melodian, he didn't have as grim an expression as I thought a friend should have in a moment like this. Reluctantly, I scanned the dates on the paper and murmured strickingly, 5 terrible days. What'd you say? Nurse Walters asked. 5 terrible days, I repeated, but I didn't have the strength to explain. That's not what Edna Carter said, Nurse Walters told me. What did she say? Mello urged her, but I could see that he knew the answer to his question. Puzzled by our reaction, Nurse Walters said, well, she told me that these were 5 glorious days, 5 especially joyful days to come in a blessed life. Isn't that odd? Do you think it means anything? At last, I met Laurie's eyes. Do you think it means anything? I asked. My hunch is yeah. Folding the paper, tucking it in a pocket, I sighed. It sure is spooky this side of paradise. But lovely, mysterious, always, sweet. Oh yeah, she said. Sweet. Gently, reverently, I took tiny Rowena from Laurie. So small she was, but in spirit and in potential, no smaller than any of us. Holding her so that she faced away from me, I turned in a full circle. Even if her eyes were as yet unfocused, perhaps she could see the room in which she had been born and see the people who had been present for her entry. Perhaps she wondered about them and about what waited beyond this room. Turning with her, I said, Rowena, this is the world. This is your life. Prepare to be enchanted. I love that book. I loved it then. I love it now. I will love it forever. But I need some hood shit in my life. So the next book that we're going to do is going to be, I already have it in mind. And yes, it's a series. And yes, I've been avoiding this for a while. But shit, I mean, this book and the book before it, I need something that's just going to make me roll my eyes so hard that I fall the fuck asleep. Not something that's going to horrify me or gross me out. Just some straight up ratchet ass shit that's just going to make me say, what the fuck did I get myself into, while looking forward to reading the next chapter. And I hope y'all are running with me, because I'm about to take the fuck off. 916-633-1537, Ratchet and Ratchet at gmail.com, Ratchet Book Club on Twitter, Ratchet Book Club on Facebook. You can leave a review on Spotify. It takes like 13 seconds. You can also leave a review on Podchaser. Copy and paste that in the Apple Podcasts, and then copy and paste that into the Good Pods app. You can donate to the show at patreon.com/singlesimulcast. $1 will get you a ton of content. You can also donate to the show at buymeacoffee.com/sscast, or on the Good Pods app. You can leave a tip in the tip jar. Thank you so much for listening. I greatly appreciate it. Y'all be good. I'm gonna holler at you later. Peace. The intro and outro to Ratchet Book Club is by That Kid Garan, and it's called Goodbyes. You can email him at tkgbeats94@gmail.com for more information on how to lease this beat.
This is Single Simulcast.
Don't know by now that you slip.